Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to another Ozdox. So tonight it's a great pleasure actually to be sitting here with two legends in the distribution space, Andrew Pike to my right and Paul Weigard to my left. Andrew from Ronin Films and Paul, co-founder and executive director of Madman Entertainment. My name's Mitzi Goldman and I'm the CEO of Documentary Australia Foundation and a documentary filmmaker. I've been a filmmaker for many years as well, directing, producing, and I think one thing that we all share up here, and probably everybody here in the audience, is not only a passion for documentary filmmaking and storytelling, but also how to reach the audience. So getting those films to an audience is what we all care really passionately about. So there's been much talk these days about impact and what is an impact producer. You know, a buzzword really, a term that was probably coined by BritDoc in the UK, who started up Good Pitch probably around the same time that DAF started, you know, close to sort of 8 years ago, and has been developing social impact documentary alongside working with the NGO sector and not-for-profit sector over there, and creating partnerships between these two sectors over there. And here we brought Good Pitch here to Australia in 2014. We've done two, 2014 and 2015. And our model is slightly different because we really engage the philanthropic sector very heavily in supporting documentary storytelling, and what they're most interested in is creating an impact with documentary. So at DAF, the work that we've done over the last 8 to 10 years has been very much about both educating the philanthropic sector about documentary and what stories documentary filmmakers are telling, and how it's a really great fit with philanthropic aims, and also educating the documentary film sector about philanthropic interests and their goals and aims and what they hope to achieve, and how it's a really good fit together. So I'm just going to show you a little promo about DAF because it sort of sets the scene about what DAF is and how we pitch. This is very much pitched to the philanthropic sector. It's the story we tell to the philanthropic sector about why they might consider getting involved with documentary. Then we'll carry on and talk a bit more about impact.
It requires intervention.
She was sitting in the chair like a rag doll.
The challenge is, what are we going to do about it?
We don't know what kind of people we're going to be introducing into our community.
Who will not cry for our children and our country and our culture? That story needs to be told.
The documentary Bully has already been seen by 1 in 3 school kids in the US. I Am a Girl has been mapped to the school curriculum and thousands of teachers are already using it in the classroom. And the Oasis inspired a government undertaking to halve youth homelessness. Funding a documentary can bring about social change in a way that direct donations often can't. Documentary Australia Foundation allows you to partner with filmmakers to make sure vital stories get told and seen, and to do it tax effectively.
I really like the fact that we've got an external body that is managing and looking after the governance, so it gives me comfort as a philanthropist.
I think they bring a really deep understanding of both sides of the equation. They understand film, they understand documentary, but they also understand what philanthropists care about. And DAF gives a framework to not only drive that social change, but to actually measure it as well.
Working with DAF on my film, I'm a Girl, was the most liberating creative experience that I've ever had. The DAF model is really unique because it brings people to the table that really care and really want to be involved in your film.
To give us the most joyous thing, I think living for purpose is the best way to live. It's the most engaging, alive way to be.
To make a difference to just about any issue, telling your story through a powerful documentary and getting it seen by the right audience is one of the most effective things that you can do.
So that's kind of the pitch to the philanthropic sector, the pitch that we make. It's really about kind of reframing documentary in a way that is about why would they fund documentary. I mean, a lot of philanthropy, people will have heard me say this many times before probably, but they're not necessarily interested in funding documentary. When I started at DAF, I was very keen to try and find a new funding paradigm for documentary because the old models are broken, not just in production funding, but also, you know, it felt that it was harder and harder to get films into cinemas, and it's become harder and harder to get documentaries on television as well. So how could we create something that was going to bring funding into both the production side and the distribution side that could actually fund distribution and marketing and outreach, whatever you want to call it, and drive, you know, in an era where the whole landscape's been shifting and there's a whole new world on the internet and there are a whole lot of new partners with massive databases. So when we talk about impact, creating impact with the work, we talk about it in those terms to the philanthropic sector because that's what they're interested in. If they're passionately interested in Indigenous issues and they want to actually make a difference in that area, then we need to say, how is the film going to help them make a difference in that area? How is the film going to amplify the issues to both really broad and really targeted audiences? How can we work with the corporate sector? How can we work with NGOs? How can we work with organisations, government policy, education, that have their own specific and often very, very large databases and drive films in diverse directions into audiences and get buy-in from these partners. So that's the model that that probably many of you have seen us showcase at Good Pitch, and that's the model that DAF is basically based on and what we're doing at Documentary Australia Foundation. So many people ask me, well, how does it fit in with traditional distribution? So is it the same really? And because I've been in the industry for many years and I've got relationships with distributors all around the world, distributors have also said to me, impact, you know, we've been doing this for years, you know, it's just the same thing with another name. And there's been a little bit of a tension, a friction, I suppose, from some in the distribution sector internationally and possibly here as well, that this is not a new thing. This is just the same thing with a different name. I think there are new aspects to what's happening now, and I definitely think it's a really exciting era to be a documentary filmmaker and to be charting new avenues to the audience. And so I thought, we discussed at Ozdox, which I have to say is a wonderful small committee of volunteers who put together these sessions every month. And I think it was Tom who said, let's do something on impact producing. And I thought, well, we should really do it in conjunction with traditional distribution and how the whole jigsaw puzzle fits together. So who better to ask to join me here on the panel? And this is really, I want to have it as an informal conversation, and I'm encouraging you to just interrupt and put your hands up, go to the microphone and ask us questions. This is streamed also, and welcome to all of you out there who are with us. It's really great to have on my right Andrew Pike, who has been 40 years, possibly more, 40 years or so, as a filmmaker, a writer, an author, a distributor, an exhibitor, has sat on many boards, the Australian Film Commission, the National Film and Sound Archive, has an Order of Australia, has a Byron Kennedy Award, has made a massive contribution to the documentary industry in this country. The film industry has charted relationships with China and Japan, and the French film industry, and is really, has a wealth of knowledge and an impressive career, and still has Ronin films. The doors are open and still distributing in an era when many other distributors have closed their doors, I think, and have found it increasingly difficult. And on my left, Paul Weigard, Madman Entertainment, probably one of the most successful distribution and exhibition companies in the country, and probably internationally as well. Maybe 20 years in business.
It is our 20th this year, so we're the half-life.
The half-life, 20 years is impressive, going from strength to strength, and it's probably fair to say possibly a more commercial, maybe Andrew would disagree, I don't know. I mean, this is the conversation we're going to have, but it's not so much about business models. It's more about films, stories, reaching audiences, and how best to do it, which is what I'd like to talk about with my two colleagues. So I might just start with Andrew, actually, and ask you, if you were to look back over the last 40 years of being in the business, but with a particular focus on distribution. We know that you're passionate about documentary. You've been a great champion of documentary all these years. And how would you characterise the change and how distribution has evolved and changed over the last 40 years?
I think one of the the key factors in surviving for so long, it's actually 42 years to be pedantic, is that we've had to adapt constantly. I mean, in obvious ways, we began selling 16mm prints to schools and libraries. That changed to video, VHS, and then to DVD, and now there's streaming. But I think that, so that the sort of technology has changed, the mode of delivery has changed in a technical sense, but there are many, many aspects of continuity right through in terms of how to communicate effectively with audiences or potential audiences, how to get people into seeing your film, whether it's in a cinema or on a VHS tape or on DVD or on a streaming platform. That communicating with the audience is a constant, and I think that I've been writing advertising copy. Well, some people would call it advertising copy. I've been writing pitches about films that we distribute for all of those years, and I think I began writing rather long, clunky essays trying to convince people. I remember we had a Japanese film called Muddy River, and the stills were terrible. And what on earth were we going to, we're putting it into cinemas, what on earth were we going to do to try and attract an audience? The Japanese ads were useless to us. I thought they were terrible. So I wrote an essay and we printed it in sort of 15-point font, and the ads in the Canberra Times and the Sydney Morning Herald were just pure text. And it worked. The audience came because I think the words were effective, because I was trying to communicate from the heart. But trying to refine the language, trying to refine the message, it's not advertising. I mean, in a sense it is, but it's not really what it's about. It's actually trying to provide a stimulus for you to come to us to see the film that we're offering. And I think that that's an absolute constant all the way through. It's still something that occupies a lot of my time, is sort of grappling with a wonderful film to find the language that will make it sound wonderful. And very often filmmakers, with all due respect to some of the ones we distribute for who may be watching, filmmakers are not always very good at translating into text what their film is really about.
So nowadays
that's
nowadays you must have to describe it in 24 characters or something like that instead of the essay.
Well, yeah, but I think you still need, the one-liner, you need the one paragraph, then you need the one page and all those things. But, one can talk about those at great length in a different context, but I think I'm just raising this issue of communication as something that is absolutely constant.
But people say that there's no money in distribution. That distribution is dead. It's broken. The old models are broken, and there's no money in it. Would you agree with that?
I don't agree. There's no money in it. It's getting harder to find the money, so one has to adapt again. I think that there was a period of very rapid change in the last 5, 7 or 8 years, but that seems to have stabilised to some extent now, and there are sort of more predictable patterns of income from distribution seem to be prevailing. Yeah.
And what would you say, Paul? So firstly, what have you seen over the last 20 years? Let's say you started with anime.
A few more grey hairs. Major changes. Well, or complement what Andrew has been speaking about. To me, it's much more of a global marketplace, and where the information is being sourced. So that's, as we all appreciate, but there's no. It absolutely puts the microscope on the way in which we go about releasing films and the strategy behind them, where we have to think about everything that we're doing here with as much a global context, in that what's happening in a couple of the key territories will actually have a material and direct and immediate impact on what happens in this marketplace. And again, we're all consumers, so we're all aware of it, but just the way in which, and I think this is where impact producing has found a niche. We've all been doing forms of it for a long time, but because the way in which people are sourcing information has become so fractured, and so everyone's got so much, there's such a degree of ADD in everything that happens, that or doesn't happen, and people move on so quickly. So how do you keep something relevant, ongoing? And there's so many different ways in which we can communicate to audiences, and just to have that sustained level of interest or enthusiasm and push from within a conventional or traditional distribution beast, and most of them are beasts, requires a bit more attention now for particular types of films and for a sustained period of time. And I think that's what basically defines impact producing now, is a sustained level of engagement. So, but Andrew's quite right. I think all the humans are humans, so we've got to find out what the hooks are and what's relevant and what's hitting the zeitgeist of the moment. They're all the same things that were the things that either made a hit or saw a film disappear 42 years ago.
Yeah. So I guess I have two questions for you. One is, would you not pick up a title that didn't have international resonance? And my other question is that what we were talking about earlier, that mix of strategy and magic, like how do you anticipate the zeitgeist? What is it that makes you want to pick up a film?
I guess it's tipping points, isn't it? So if it's gathering a certain degree of momentum and it's getting to a point in time where other news media and other groups are talking about a certain subject or person or movement, then that's going to gather its own sort of set of steam. So, I think the international community for distributing films is still quite small. So, and it's about a little bit of curation and taste. And what's happening internationally also from some of these quarters. So there are some barometers as to what will possibly be fed into the release strategy of a film ongoing. If they've got a particular history, then you're following that history and you jump on into that movement and feed into that movement and also generate the groundswell that's required. And so what was the second part of the question?
Oh, what was the one that you just answered?
Which is the reason
I
why
asked about,
what are the...
I said, would you pick up a film that is, say, a truly Australian subject that doesn't really have global resonance?
Yes, and there's a bunch of conditions, because obviously as...
Give some examples. Examples.
Well, the conditions would be that we know that the local films are going to require a great deal more work, so you're generating and originating a lot of the materials or the toolkit that's going to be then used to push out the film into the marketplace. And frankly, is it a film that's just going to play to Queenslanders, or is it a film that's going to play just to a particular niche population? Is it a film that we can then exploit across a number of different rights? And it has to be more than just digital. It has to be more than just TV. It has to be at least should be able to achieve a level of business across at least 2 to 3 distribution platforms. It must have an inbuilt audience in which we can grow, that we can first talk to. Examples of the films that we didn't choose to acquire, but I guess the first probably hurdle would be to put a film into the marketplace, into the theatrical marketplace, and we're talking purely about feature documentaries. Experience would suggest that we can't even contemplate the release with less than $100,000 to $200,000 spend. So if you don't think you're going to generate a certain level of income from that spend, then I think there might be other things to be spending our time on. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's the harsh reality of saying, stacking all the until you put everything into a list, you don't realise which will become, what is the priority of the business from a commercial perspective. Mm.
And Andrew, how would you answer that question? I mean, I know that you pick up a lot of Australian stories that people could argue may or may not have an international relevance. We all hope that all our films have an international resonance, of course, and will travel globally. But it's not always the case. Some films, have particular interest to Australian audiences. And you've got a catalogue of many of those films.
That's right. There are certain sort of consistent things I look for when I'm watching a film. I look for a film that has the strong presence of the filmmaker's voice, not necessarily in front of the camera, obviously, or literally their voice, but I like highly authored documentaries, films that are by people, as opposed to a corporate production that could have been done by anybody. So that's one thing I'm looking for, is a visible commitment by a filmmaker to the subject on the screen. I think that to get around to your question about what prompts us to pick up films or not, I think I should talk specifically about the core of Ronin's business. We actually function in the least sexy part of the film industry, which is what we call, for want of a better term, the education market. Terribly, people start yawning when I say that. But it is actually a very good, solid and consistent bread and butter business. And we build whatever we do around that. So I will be strongly influenced in picking up a certain film if I feel it can work in that broad education market. If I feel it can't work in that education market, I won't touch it. So a film that has, well, pick some pretty obvious and maybe silly examples. If a film comes to us with extremely strong language or extreme violence or cruelty to animals or something like that, it's not going to get into the education market. There's no point, we're not the right distributor. But give us a film about Aboriginal land rights that other distributors would run screaming from, that's perfect for us. So please bring us those films. Provided that you're making it and not a corporate entity. So, but I want to just say, can I just say a couple of things about the education market? By using the term education, I'm not talking about educational institutions, you know, primary schools, secondary schools, universities, TAFE colleges. I'm talking about those, but also about community education. So I'm talking about community associations, government departments, government agencies, and particularly public libraries. These are all good bread and butter components of our business. You know, it's not a multi-million-dollar a year in turnover business, but it pays our wages and gets money back to filmmakers, and I think actually reaches a lot of people. Not as many people as a television broadcast would if it were the ABC or SBS, but SBS One, but perhaps as many people as would watch a film on NITV, for example, I think we would reach. The lovely thing about the education market is that it's a constantly refreshing market. People are coming into the market all the time. And so films don't date in the education market. The education market's interested in content, not year of production. So we're re-releasing a lot of older films. We have, this week we're promoting a film that Rod Friedman here, who's behind the camera, made 15 years ago. But it's still topical, very relevant in terms of content, so it justifies a place in our release slate. So content is king in this market, and I get very excited by that. It means we're dealing with ideas and experiences and in communication with people. And in a way it's like we're like a library, you know. We cover subjects rather than, you know, it'd be like a library just buying books only books that were published in the last 18 months, you know. We don't do that. If the subject is right, if there are people who are going to enjoy it, we'll get it. So it's a very lively, interesting area. It's totally non-sexy. There is no red carpet. There are no opening nights. We don't take press ads in the daily newspapers. You know, we don't do television advertising, and no one writes about it. See, one exception. The Melbourne Age ran a half-page article, 20 years ago. Not long ago at all. A half-page article about radical political documentaries infiltrating the Victorian Education Department. And every film that they quoted was one of ours. Yeah. Wonderful.
You say it's not sexy, Andrew, but I think every single filmmaker that comes to me at DAF, and that, you know, we have films that are put up on our website for approval for philanthropic funding. When I ask the question, so what do you hope to achieve with your film? they all say, almost without exception, I want my film to be on the national school curriculum or on the school curriculum. My film is going to be given to, or is going to be distributed to all schools in the country, and it's going to be on the school curriculum. It's what everybody wants. But how hard is that?
It's very hard because we have to convince getting it onto the curriculum is one thing. It's not a guarantee that you'll actually get much traction in terms of sales because there are so many options in the curricula. But you have to actually convince it gets back to communication again, you have to actually convince the school librarian that this is a worthy addition to the school library, because it's the librarians who have the budget and are spending the money, so it's the librarians we try to communicate with. Individual teachers, great, we can communicate with them and we get good dialogue going with them very often, but they don't have budgets and they don't spend anything. It's the librarian that's crucial. So our database is about 4,500 people. Most of them are librarians of one sort or another. So it's not a large database, but they're all gatekeepers. And so they're very interesting people, I think. And we enjoy working with them. They're very slow. We do a mail out. Rod's film we're promoting this week. We might get our first order in 3 or 4 weeks. In a year's time, we'll still be getting orders coming in. They take ages to process their paperwork and make a decision and see if their budget will stretch. But they come.
Paul, and please, anyone who's got questions, just go to the microphone because I'm really keen for this to be an interactive session. Paul, what makes you the most excited? What, I think that, not in life, let's not get too personal, but
too much.
In terms of how Andrew, I think that Andrew has a real passion, for the education sector, for instance, and something that he's been very committed to throughout his career. What in your business, in distribution, and I must say both of you have gone into in production as well, so your distribution knowledge obviously would inform your production. But what is the most exciting thing happening at Madman for you, and what gets you up in the morning? What is it that...
It's a multi-layered question.
You can go anywhere you like with it.
Well, I think there's a great joy in any distribution. It's that sharing the experience. So when you find something that's pretty wonderful, and just to have that opportunity to share it with a wider community, there's a real buzz in that, and I guess that's the drug. And the nice thing about being in the distribution world, you get to deal with a lot of drugs, as in there's always something new every month, and you can sort of look to that on the horizon, but it also gives you a real reason for getting up in the morning, and frankly it's one of the key criterias to the decision making, is that do we actually feel passionate about the subject matter? Do we actually know enough about the subject matter? There are those films that you'll come across and go, yeah, we know there's a large, I think there's a large market out there for this particular film, but we don't know enough about that particular marketplace. So it's almost a foolhardy approach to try and take on those sorts of responsibilities to represent that type of film if you don't actually understand a little bit about the DNA of the material. Look, we work in a pretty privileged industry actually, which is of ideas, and to have a say in that, and then to present it to a wider audience.
Let's get specific then, and talk about how the blend of this impact producing, as I've described it, how many people here are actually impact producers or working in the space, or... What do you mean? Well, as I described, I think before you came in, just so... In my introduction, I said that what we call impact producing, a bit of a buzzword that's been, bandied around the last few years is maybe a new way of describing what we've always done, which is to try and create impact with our work, and however, there are differences. There are differences in actually engaging a whole lot of different groups around the film, even during production, to kind of buy in and work with the film and take it to their networks and organise, avenues to the audience that go out in many different and diverse directions, not always commercially driven, driven by wanting to make some kind of impact on audiences that may have nothing to do with commercial return. So it's really about thinking what kind of social return might come as a result of watching the film. So, and I think in the educational market we see that really clearly. It's interesting for me to see how that's worked with a very commercial business like Madman and the kind of work that you did around that sugar film. How many people here have seen that sugar film? Okay, so almost everybody, so that's pretty good. Maybe we could talk about the specifics of that a little bit.
Probably sell a few more DVDs out the front.
You never know. So how was that thinking for you in terms of, so that sugar film, for those of you who don't know it, is a film that was made about sugar, the harmful effects of hidden sugar in a lot of the foods that we eat. It was a very commercially made film. Its aim was to really reach young kids at school and high school kids, and to be very broadly accessible, to be fun and entertaining. And it was selected for Good Pitch in Australia in 2014. And we surrounded that film with organisations like Bupa, the Obesity Council, St George Institute, who else was involved? The Heart.
A very long list of participants.
A very long list of engaged and kind of invested partners in health. This was a film that Madman was both producing and would then distribute. It took some years to raise the money for the production budget, I think, and then you didn't have a broadcaster on board.
And in the end, it helped. In a way, it was empowering to not have a broadcaster. So we were liberated to then let the film find its own path into the market.
Can you talk a little bit about that, the blend of those two aims, if you like, the social aims, the commercial aims, and the strategy, how you rolled it out with those two working together?
Okay, well, I'd like to think of it a bit like a bit of a virtuous cycle, insofar as we were able to dictate the release timing, so we were able to introduce it to a small circle of people, and then to see how they would respond to it, custom the cut of the film again, introduce it to a wider group of people, find out where the actual pockets of interest were. At first there was a degree of resistance at exhibition, and there was also some uncertainty as to actually which way should we approach it. Do we cut the film down, do the large free-to-air sale? What's the right time of the year? When's the zeitgeist for sugar? And there's a whole slew of things. I think a real key point in having distributors involved and people who are seeing a lot of films pass through the gate, you get a sense of what is the right timing for a film and to when, and not to panic, and also to actually have a sense of what's going on in the wider marketplace. So we quickly realised for the sugar film, it will be both mainly driven by word of mouth, and for probably mostly young mums who are mostly concerned about their kids. That's the primary audience. Because the thing is, like as a proposition, it's sort of not that sexy, because no one wants to be told what not to do. So, and at one stage we thought, oh, look, it's all happening now. It's all happening now, and and Damon, who's a brilliant talent, and fortunate to have a guy who's sort of decided to dedicate, a number of years of his life to the subject matter. So it's a key ingredient as to why you invest the time. And I remember him at the gate saying, "We've got to get going with this. It's breaking now." And we thought, look, people don't want to hear about sugar running into Christmas. It's not the time, frankly. let's do it on the other side. Let's go post Easter.
Post Easter eggs.
And deal with the guilt. I mean, this is it's only being streamed, so no one knows. But like, it's interesting how it's all about release timing, and we thought, look, the greatest asset that we had, and I think this is common across most documentaries that are proven to be the successful ones. They're about people and about journeys and about something that we all can identify with in one way or another, and that this particular film had all of those ingredients and sugar. So it was. It took a long time, frankly, to get a lot of those partners that you described on board. And, interesting enough, only today we had Kathy Freeman email us saying, "Wow, what a documentary! What a significant work for the people that she's sort of dealing with within her foundation." And this is 18 months on, and I think that's another part of the whole decision making about which films we jump into, which films will have longevity, which films are just going to be a political puff and be meaningless in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time, and you then have to make the decision of resources, and if you're going to bring in, say, impact producers who are going to be associated with the project for a long period of time, is there something to say in 12 months or 18 months? Is it still relevant?
That's a good point.
Or not? So
that's a good point.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. I'd like to talk about your example a little bit, Andrew, and I'm just waiting for somebody to get up and go to that microphone and ask a question.
I have a question, but I don't know where the microphone is.
It's just there, Martha.
I can't see it.
You tell me the question and I'll repeat it.
Oh, the question is, when Andrew's talking with, about getting these things out to schools and so on, but they're all getting it through streaming. And
so do you want me to repeat the question? The question is, in the education sector, getting the films to schools, how does that still work when everyone's streaming things now?
That's why I said in the last bit I spoke, I said that we have to really work hard to communicate with the school librarians and with teachers about why they should pick up this particular film that we're offering. Because a lot of teachers, frankly, are interested in covering a subject. So if they're doing something on climate change, they want to get a video on climate change. And if they can stream something easily on climate change, that'll do, and we'll have a discussion around that. Why do I want them to get Tom's film, the Hungry Tide, in particular? I have to convince them that there's actually something more about climate change that they will learn from this film. So we have to actually do a bit of work. So we find that, but it's still very hard to overcome the barrier because teachers are time poor, they'll take easy solutions. So
YouTube. YouTube.
Yeah, which is YouTube. And, YouTube. Quick Googles and they'll find something. So we have to work at that. I think that where we do best are with films that are not, with subject areas that are not widely covered through other source material. So, for example, films on Indigenous Australia, there aren't many of those on easily available through the BBC or through some other big international platforms. So there's a tendency for people to come towards us because we've got a lot of content.
This is a good time for you to speak a little bit about Putapari and why you got involved with that, and maybe before we have that conversation we could show the clip.
Yep.
So if we could see the clip of Putapari and then speak a little bit about that one.
My name is Tom Lawford. My blackfellow name is Budabuddy. These last years have been like a roller coaster ride. Sometimes I was on top of the world. Sometimes I find myself in places that I'd rather forget. My grandfather, Spider, was worried. He already lost 2 grandsons to Globe and was desperate to help me. It was my first trip to country. It felt good to be out there. No pub and no distractions. I always heard stories about the snake spirit living in the waterhole. When I first went out there with my grandfather, I saw something that changed my life.
It ritually made rain in one of the driest parts of Australia.
And the old people that trusted me or believed in me to carry on this responsibility. Cut!
Yes, good trailer. It's a good film too. I think perhaps I'll say a few controversial things to just get the discussion going a bit here. That really, I think, effective impact producing has to work with traditional distribution methods as well as new distribution methods. I don't think you can have a truly effective impact campaign if you only go to new platforms for delivery, meaning particularly digital platforms, streaming, VOD and so on. That you are going to have a much more effective result if you work through the traditional or heritage forms of distribution as well. I'm about to start a documentary. I have 2 impact producers on my team, and we are planning to do that. We're planning that our film will be theatrically released and released on DVD as well as through digital platforms. So why do I say these things need to work together? The theatrical is the best way of getting serious, in-depth media coverage, getting the journalists to write feature articles, getting the reviewers to write reviews in the daily press. And in a sense, I think for a lot of documentaries, the theatrical release is a glorious form of advertising. You do it to get the media coverage, get the media profile, and then you can build on that, work with that in other platforms. So I'll throw that one out to you. Whether that advertising is worth the $200,000 that Paul is talking about or not, that's hopefully you get some of that money back from the theatrical. So it's not all just spent in achieving the media coverage. But theatrical docs generally, at least the ones we distribute, don't make a lot of money at all.
So what's your strategy with Putapari? Can you tell us what
Putapari,
the plans are?
We felt that we first of all, we had a legal obligation to deliver a theatrical release for the producers because they'd budgeted the 40% offset into their finance structure. So we had to do a theatrical release. And they managed their money very well, so they were able to assist us in covering some of the costs. I wish we had 200,000, we had a lot less than that.
It's not every film.
No. But so we did the theatrical release because, in a sense, we had to, but I was also very, very intent on achieving a high media profile with the film, which we did, and we brought on board Tracy Mayer and her team to do the promotion, because I see that having a really strong publicist is part of that process. You're getting the result out of the theatrical release. There's no good doing a theatrical release and doing the publicity yourself, because it's a lot of work, and you may not get the traction as readily as a high-profile publicist may. And I speak from bitter experience of there. I've rung up critics and begged them to review our film and all this sort of thing, and I've been there and done that. Other people do it much better than me. So there's another aspect of traditional or heritage distribution that I want to draw your attention to, and maybe this will get some discussion going too, is that in the documentary area, and particularly in the education market as I've described it, DVD is king. It is not dead. Our turnover, I'm going to say this very emphatically because no one believes me. Everyone says DVD is dead, but let me tell you that our turnover from sales in the education market, 95% is DVD. Streaming was 20%, it has decreased.
Would you
figure that out? But
would you agree with that, Paul?
Well,
you also do home.
Home entertainment.
The often, well, just about the education community. Well, I go to the expert to get the numbers there. But the broader market, it's we often talk about the digital sense and the physical dollars and whatnot. The total market's still a circa $1 billion, of which about for home entertainment across all categories, not just feature docs, of course. The ratio at the moment on transactional VOD, and most distributors now are putting into the subscription VOD into the sort of like a television bucket, if you're going to think about it in terms of how to categorise. Transactional VOD still growing for films, dropping off for television due to the streaming services. But still growing, it's probably 14% up on last year, and of the total pie would be circa 20%. So physical media still, to Andrew's point, is the lion's share of the home entertainment market as we sit here today. Now you can look at trends from all over the world, and everyone has their own different windows and ways in which they release content and different sort of catch-up windows. And so there's a number of markets to look to, but every market has its own, certainly has its own nuances. And at the moment, physical DVD certainly still is supported by all of the mass merchants, all the major specialty retailers. The loss of the ABC stores ostensibly over the course of this year. But I don't think that we'll lose some of that customer base because they're not necessarily going to go into the environment they've come to know. But it's still it's a significant part of the food chain for financing and distribution, and it's clearly about choice. It's not going to disappear right now. People's habits certainly have changed. And I think what we're finding is that there's the bigger hits are getting even bigger, but they're also being impacted enormously by piracy. And the specialist content that's talking to specific audiences, which is largely where documentaries do fit, still certainly has a very vibrant market, whereas the mid-ground is sort of losing, is lost its way.
It's interesting. I saw that once a film is released on DVD, the piracy levels increase massively. There was a statistic on that sugar film, actually. That
look, if you're talking about piracy being content that's available through torrent sites, within minutes of content being available on any platform, it will be available.
Yeah.
And one thing, you know, there's one of the strengths of the theatrical market. We've got to the point now with a number of our films, we will not provide screeners to even the critics, because we don't want to go down that path of just jeopardising a film's potential. There's a film which we have in New Zealand at the moment, and just to take off topic here about talking about documentaries, called Hunt for the Wilder People, and it's #1 in the New Zealand box office at the moment for its second week, and not a single previous screen has been sent or shared or anything online to anyone, because we know within some of the audiences there that will be drawn to that material. That's it. And it goes back to the point about global release dates.
Martha's got a burning question.
Well, Andrew, you know that all of our films, including Tom's Hungry Tide, are shown on TV. The minute they're shown on TV, Screen Rights and its licensees
That's correct.
and stream them to schools, which I discovered with a big shock. There was one in the library at UTS, I think, and I said, well, where did they get that? They didn't get it from me, I'm the distributor. But no, they got it from one of these people that stream it and sell it. And I think that it's very big.
I think that, Martha, this is the screen rights area is the subject for a whole nother discussion. It has eroded the secondary school market dramatically. That most of the sales we still get today of DVDs into secondary schools tends to be wealthy private schools. But it's but Screen Rights and organisations like Enhanced TV can only trade in things that are broadcast. So they're going to trade in a television version of a film. They're going to trade without extras, without contextualisation. So that's why when we're doing a DVD of a film that has been on air, we provide a lot of extras, sometimes more extras than the extras last a lot longer than the film itself. And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah.
And we provide a lot of contextualisation. That's why I spend so much time writing the cover notes, that they actually not trying to sell you something, but communicate with you and get some ideas going. And, you know, I'm hoping people will, my librarians that we sell to, use those cover notes when they catalogue. Thank God. They're wonderful. So
I think there's a question up the back. Yeah. Yes. Could you come to the microphone?
Sure. I'll fill up a bit of airtime. There we go. I was going to ask a question, but you're quick.
Hello, hi. Sorry, it's Janet Merriweather. Yes, I'm just finishing a film which I'd love to speak to either of you about, called Reindeer in My Sami Heart. It's about Indigenous issues up in the Arctic Circle. So I'm on the verge of, trying to get a study guide produced, with Atom, etc. And we were nominated for a couple of Atom Awards, so we've got, hopefully a bit of traction there in education, etc. One question Atom had for me, which probably affects a lot of people, is, well, when's the TX date? Because we won't do a study guide until we know its broadcast date. And I said, well, there's going to be a lot of films out there, and I'm sure both of you are handling films which may not necessarily sell to Australian TV, but you might still want to have all of the education materials produced. And I'm wondering, obviously, in a lot of classrooms these days, they don't have the time to look at a 70 or 80-minute film. And I'm just interested in recommendations about maybe splitting a film in two, or any comments you might have about what good lengths might be for primary, secondary, tertiary classroom use.
Yeah. Can I plunge in on that?
Take a deep dive.
A long time ago, we've been going 42 years, so maybe 20 years ago, we did an experiment. We released a film that had done very well theatrically for us. It was called a documentary called a Canadian film about bulimia and anorexia called The Famine Within. Very, very good film. We still have it in our catalogue and it still sells. We offered it into the marketplace, into the education market, as a half-hour film, a 1-hour film, and the theatrical version, which was about 95 minutes. We sold one of the half-hour versions, none of the 60-minute, and we sold something, this is 20 years ago, about $90,000 worth of VHS tapes of the feature-length version. You know, we've just never gone back to reconsider that. Length, in my view, length does not matter. Primary schools, I think, are an exception, but they're a very hard market to reach because there doesn't seem to be a lot of money there, or a sense of a school librarian having a really useful money-spending role. But with secondary schools and universities, I feel length doesn't matter. I think if a filmmaker comes to us now with a film that's of substantial length, you know, like 90 minutes or so, I would argue that it might be of benefit to have a really detailed menu with chapters that are actually named so that people can, you know, teachers can navigate their way around and get the episode that deals with the melting of icebergs or whatever.
In terms of, I mean, it's choice in a way. I feel like we've got a film at the moment which it's being moved around to all the tertiary institutions called The Hunting Ground, and there's 3 different sort of run lengths of that particular film. Everyone is screening, to Andrew's point, the full cut, but the most the things that have sort of popped up that people just want to make sure that they're not discriminating against potential audiences is to ensure that there's closed captions and audio description and these sorts of things, rather than just so it's inclusive, rather than trying to tailor your film to every single marketplace. And frankly, I don't know too many filmmakers who've got the appetite to then cut down their film to go out to so-called new audiences.
One thing that we've been doing is we've been working a lot with teacher focus groups through the teachers associations and the principals associations, and we'll screen a documentary to a group of teachers and we'll ask what area in the curriculum it fits best within, and then when there's some money in the budget for the education campaign, look to working with a teacher to map the film directly to the curriculum area, and that usually means that they do a very considered study guide. So ATOM study guides are quite general really, and they're more mapped to English and media studies. If you're working with teachers in the area of geography or PD, HPE or history or the other curriculum areas, they can break a film down into components that will map directly to what they need to teach in the classroom. And in that context, we've found that a lot of teachers do like to have bite-sized chunks of the film. It may be chapters of the film. It may not require that the filmmaker cut a whole new version for educational, unless there is something contentious in the film that's not suitable for the education sector. But quite often they will take like 10-minute chunks of the film and then map those short vignettes, if you like, to different parts of their lesson plans. And that way the teachers kind of have a buy-in to create their own lessons with it, so they're not having to use the film as it is, but they're actually involved in creating the study materials with the film. And then we've found that they have quite a lot of distribution then through the teachers' associations and the principals' associations, and that seemed to be a better way to get into the education sector, where teachers are actually really time poor and are looking for resources, but they don't want resources thrown at them. Often they can't rely on the librarian, and they're having to create their own materials to use in the classroom, and they distribute them and share them through conferences and that kind of thing.
I guess that's one sort of point of difference between DVDs and a lot of most of the streaming services today, be they transactional, download to own, the chaptering and the extras, and being able to tailor and what it is that you do want to see. And we used to have the discussions some time ago where it was, well, it'll give you more flexibility to sell the film to broadcasters, the hour-long cut. I thought, well, actually, all it does is reduce the number of minutes that they're going to be paying for, and they've got enough slots for feature, and if the film is, frankly, is it strong enough,
they will broadcast it. Yeah,
it'll hold its own, and it won't be impediment to sales, frankly. And I think, gee, I would always set out to preserve the original version of the film, particularly in documentaries. And the idea of then having to cut down several different versions, I think is, I think you're almost grovelling.
You make it work. I'd like to just go to exhibition, to go back to theatrical and talk a little bit about how you might weave in some of the sort of impact aims of a film with a really theatrical documentary. And we were talking earlier about there's a couple of films that you've got coming up on the slate. Do you want to talk about one of those, whether it's the Michael Moore film or the
at the moment we've got the
autism,
I think this is the one plug for the moment. We've got the Michael Moore film, Where to Invade Next, possibly the most successful feature documentarian ever. So he doesn't need too much more wind in the sails. That film's in the market at the moment, and there's obviously a great deal of expectation for what Michael does. There's a film called Life Animated. We can have a look at that. We have a clip from the film that I can then talk to as far as what potentially the strategy might well be, because we've yet to roll out what we are doing.
Okay.
But I could talk to some of the ingredients in this particular film that appeal to us. That will be films that, it'll be a film that will have a component of event releasing, a component of theatrical on demand. It'll have a component of impact producing. So it ticks a number of those sorts of different sort of distribution pathways and film festival play, frankly. So do you want to look at that clip?
That's Life Animated. Thanks.
It was Ronin. I see Owen on the bed, flipping through a Disney book. And I see, sort of over to my left, I see Iago, the puppet. Now, Iago is the evil sidekick to the villain Jafar from Aladdin. Now, I know Owen loves his puppet.
Jafar! Jafar! Get a grip!
I grab the puppet, I pull it up to my elbow, and I begin to crawl across the rug as quietly as I can. And Owen turns to the puppet like he's bumping into an old friend. I say to him,
Owen, how does it feel to be you?
And I said, not good, because I don't have any friends.
Now I'm under the bedspread, and I just bite down hard. just say to myself, stay in character.
And I said, okay. Owen, when did you and I become such good friends?
And he said, when I watched Aladdin, you made me laugh. And then we talk, Owen and Iago, for a minute and a half. It's the first conversation we've ever had.
So it's yet to have a key artwork and trailer yet to be completed, but should be completed next week. So it's, as you can see there, it's about family, animated sidekicks and autism. And it's a film that was awarded the Best Director Award in Sundance this year. So it's obviously a very well-made film, and at its heart, incredibly well told story, which is obviously vital for any film to survive on the big screen. So the film presents a film festival pathway, and this is the conundrum of what to now do in terms of taking and mapping the film's release here on. Does it start with a film festival life? Does it start with some event releases which could involve the filmmaker, the guy on screen there who, and this is basically a father and a well-known journalist, a Pulitzer Prize winner, to come out with his son, who you also saw who's now a spokesperson for autism. So we can go down an event path. And then there's the impact producing, which is, okay, there's a number of years ahead for this film in terms of its pathway into the marketplace. And there's so many different interest groups and communities out there that are impacted by autism. And so how do you foster those potential sort of relationships or partners to a film? And so it's sort of bringing this amalgam of vested interests together and frankly also bring about a commercial result to the producers and the stakeholders who've helped fund this project. Up to a fifth of the film is Disney animations.
Was that fair use, or did you pay for it? Did they pay for it?
We weren't the principal producers, but it was with the blessings of the Disney group. So I think it's the greatest advertising that Disney will have for their films.
Mm.
So I'm not really answering your question deliberately.
It's really interesting.
It's complicated because they'll potentially receive a return. There's a stake. A film like this doesn't get made without the endorsement of the bigger group, and it's a principal character, frankly, of the film. The actual voice actors of the characters that you see, of the sidekicks, and he only relates to the sidekicks, not the leading characters, which is a fantastic sort of element to the film. And the voice characters, the guys themselves, come into the school where Owen is growing up to talk to the students or the kids suffering from who are on the spectrum of autism. So I guess the example there is, here is a project that has all of the ingredients that and potential, frankly, to fund a role for impact producing, and also has a clear commercial pathway. And it's the amalgam of putting all those sort of ingredients together. But how best to step it out so that you're optimising the opportunity with not cannibalising the prospects of the film. In the global marketplace, it'll probably most likely be released late July. So we use that as a point of reference to when we earmark the release of the film in this territory and New Zealand, because we know also that the guy's a writer for the New York Times. There's going to be a lot of coverage. There's going to be a lot of information filtering into this marketplace. So it's all sort of feeds into the profile that we'll have for the film when it comes to its release.
It's a really interesting example, a good one to watch. There must be questions. I'm sure there's questions. Yes, over there. The microphone's over there, but there's no one standing at it.
Can I do a shout?
Yeah, shout. Shout.
Your voice cuts through.
Thank you. Paul, what, to both of you, actually, also Andrew, is that obviously as distributors you have, and must have, a commercial imperative. Where does that butt up against potentially the impact aims of those supporting a film, who probably have a specific target, a political goal or a social goal, and they have less concern about your commercial imperatives in terms of rights and release dates and opportunities for audiences to see the film. Is that getting sorted out, or is it as complex as ever?
So I'll just repeat the question for the benefit of the streaming audience. So the question is really about if there is a tension at all between the social aims and the commercial aims. Is that the question essentially? Where do they butt up against each other and how are those sorted out? Is that correct, Simon?
Yeah.
I think it's always what are the aligned interests, and you need to set that out in the first instance. I'd probably always argue that if it's commercially successful, it'll meet all of the objectives of all of the other stakeholders. The first question is, and the question that we always ask back to the producers of any projects that we get ourselves involved in is, if they were releasing the film, how would they go about it? Because often it's the filmmakers themselves have been spending such an extended period of time with the subject matter, and will provide a huge number of insights as to who the potential audience is. And it's also, again, it calls out when you clearly are not on the same page, and that they may not know some of the realities of the marketplace, and on occasions think about the marketplace in too small a ways. Often think bigger about the projects, frankly. I think you can do a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of time and energy spent on just plugging away, and it's actually quite inefficient. The margins are getting squeezed, the world's sort of speeding up, and it's about trying to be as effective as you possibly can. Yeah. So I sometimes think that you've got to reverse the thinking a little bit about what's the bigger opportunity sometimes, and frankly, everyone will know about it, but it's not the same rule book for every film. We've got a film, which I got another clip here, which we could show, called First Monday in May, and it's about fashion. And if you're not doing red carpet and doing everything that everyone expects of fashion, well, you're sort of missing the pitch. And it's about the glamour, it's about putting it out there. And we know that all our effort will be centred on those first 3 weeks of its release, and then the film will look after itself for the next 42 years.
I would say also that often that work that you put into the community and the social return and all of that can absolutely pay off for commercial return as well. I mean, it kind of goes both ways. It can go both ways if it's done, in a really...
Yeah, I was going to say that's a good thing to bring back the Sugar film and Damien Gamo's role in the ongoing...
Yeah. Yeah, he's been an absolute star, and the guy's gone out there and he's had a vested interest in the project, so he's been remunerated that way. He's now on a speaking tour. He also published a book. So there's a number of motivating reasons for his continued involvement, and something obviously clearly it's been a very personal and passionate project. One thing I would say about the other bigger partners you may well bring into, and this is why it's so hard to get other partners involved with films in their release, is that the corporate world and the non-for-profit world moves in such a slow sort of timetable that in the world of releasing films, when you go, okay, we've got the right date, we've established where enough of a run-up in terms of cross-trailer play, postering, da-da-da, and it's in 4.5 months, 5 months. And then you go talk to corporate Australia. Oh, that's in this financial year, isn't it? Oh no, we don't have any money to spend. Oh right, okay. So sometimes you need to start acting on these relationships very early on, because there's such a long period of time between their being able to activate their members, the various groups that are involved up and down the food chain in terms of accepting and buying into the process. So
Which is why it's really important to get them involved early, as early as possible.
Like,
during production,
imagine
during
and even the idea of a bank or an insurance company moving within 12 months.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you
So
have
would you like
a response?
Do you want to see fashion?
Yeah. All right, then I'll have a go.
Okay, all right. Fashion takes us to a different direction.
Yeah,
but,
and it's just to show that this is the cheese as opposed to the chalk.
Yeah. It's the name of it is Monday's
first
Monday in May.
Mind reading.
Fashion can create a dream, create a fantasy. It's the kind of theatre.
The Met Ball is the Super Bowl of social fashion events.
The star of this evening is Andrew Pike.
This show is going to be controversial, but I'm not afraid of controversy.
Andrew is the real visionary. It's rare to find someone so creative that they change the way you look at art.
It's the biggest show we've ever done.
Huge.
We want to be careful between the costumes that we don't completely obscure the Chinese works of art. It's not Disneyland.
There is the perennial debate about whether fashion can ever be art.
What we do is applied art.
I never dream that my clothes should be in a museum.
You need the mixture of art and commerce.
Anna's gift is to cross-fertilize. It's like a giant aquarium on that night.
Beyonce, Kim and Kanye, Chastain, Julianne Moore.
I thought he wasn't coming.
I know, but then he decided he wanted to come.
Okay, can you not be on his cell phone the entire time then?
Loud and clear.
There's a lot of political hurdles. Some of the topics that the exhibition is addressing could be interpreted as being racist.
This is just going to look like a Chinese restaurant.
We're on a super tight time frame.
We have a lot to do.
Rihanna, we can't lose her, right? We just didn't realize how expensive.
We have basically 2 days to install the whole exhibition. We're driving everyone crazy.
I don't know what to do. We just don't have the seats.
We just underestimated the scale of the show.
And then Jennifer Lawrence says, ladies and gentlemen, Rihanna.
Whoa!
Oh my God.
Got a party tonight.
This is the queen of the night.
Sense of mystery and danger.
This room is a dream.
I think fashion should be recognized.
What's up, Netball?
When it touches people and moves people. I mean, what more can you ask from art?
Looks like fun.
So it's considered the easy sell, but then again, it's not. What's the expectation? Is a success? Again, in terms of aligning interests, is a success $200,000 at the box office, or is it $500,000, or double that again?
Yeah, it's an interesting film to raise in this forum after I've been carrying on about the education market and our librarians. It's a good example of a film that I wouldn't take on for distribution, not because I think it's inappropriate for anyone to distribute it or show it, and I think you'll do really well with it.
It'd be good in textiles.
No, exactly. Is that I think that it commands a much wider audience than we would ever reach with our work. You know, so a film on Aboriginal land rights, we're the right distributor. For something like this film, we don't have the reach into the home market, which I think is absolutely vital for this film. Would you?
The irony is, Putapari will probably end up playing on more sites.
Yeah.
Than
Well,
the first
Putapari
Madman.
has crossed over, I think, you know, but I think this one.
So that's a really interesting point, because knowing where to place your film is probably what a lot of filmmakers are thinking about, and how to have that understanding of where the audience is, who the audience is, which is a question that's always asked, and how do you reach them, is really important in knowing where to place your film.
Yeah.
And it gives me quite a good segue actually into a discussion that I think we'd like to have about TUG or FanForce, these cinema on demand models, because some films you know, like this one, will have a commercial release. It'll be picked up in cinemas. It'll have a run in cinemas. The Aboriginal land rights films are films that I do believe there is an audience out there for them, and we make the audience for them. But it might be a film that you would go through a TUG model or a cinema on demand model and get a passionate person to host a screening. I know you've both got thoughts, and you both work with TUG and FanForce possibly to some extent. Can we talk a little bit about that model and how that fits in?
The big drawback from my perspective about TUG and FanForce is that if you try to build a platform for a film around in that way, around cinema on demand, you're going to find it really difficult to get the mainstream media coverage. The critics will tend not to review a film that is shown only on TUG. The newspapers will be more reluctant to give a feature article about something that is only on TUG. That's a reality of the world out there. It's not.
But why is that? Is it
opinion.
because it's just one night here, one night there?
Exactly, and so I think that may change, but at the moment, and I did check with Tracy Mayer, our publicist, on this, that regular, traditional, heritage theatrical release is the only sure way of having enough exposure to bring in the mainstream media coverage. So TUG and Cinema on Demand can actually fulfill another function, you know, having event screenings and so on. But for me as a distributor looking at the long-term prospects for a film, I'm happy for a filmmaker to do those one-off event screenings, because I feel my time is better spent trying to build up other markets, other outlets for the film. And a traditional theatrical release is one that I see as much more central to the long-term prospects for a film. We're running out of time, but can I respond to the comment, the question up the back there? So I think that you really hit the nail right on the head there, is that what I think is critical to this discussion is that I think for the most effective form of impact, you do need to work with the traditional and heritage forms of distribution as well as the new. And what has changed in the distribution world today is that there is a tension between the most effective forms of streaming and download platforms on one hand and making money on the other. And I think that that's what makes distribution life today so interesting and challenging, is finding a balance between those two. There is no doubt that if you want your film to be seen very, very widely, that it will be best placed on YouTube without a paywall and heavily promoted. So you've got to have philanthropic funding behind you, hopefully, to promote the work, which is then freely available. You'll reach an enormous number of people, but you won't earn any money, which is why you need the philanthropic funding to cover you, so that you're not bankrupt at the end of the day. So if you can't get philanthropic funding, you know, you've got to adjust. You're going to have to put a paywall in. But our experience has been that even if you put in the tiniest of paywalls, the numbers disappear. You know, we have one filmmaker who offers his work for free through his website, massive exposure, and his films, you know, need that because they're on very topical political issues. And he's very well aware, as are we, that as soon as a paywall is introduced, you know, $3 per download or something, he's going to lose all of those people. No one's going to pay. I think that for a lot of documentaries, you know, the films are a little bit like eating salad. You know, we know they're good for, we know the greens are good for us, but we don't go out to eat them for comfort food, you know. We don't carry lettuce around in our bag to snack on during the day, you know. And if people are at home wanting to have some, you know, something comfortable to watch, you know, an entertaining movie, they're more likely to go for fiction or a
high art fashion film.
A high art fashion film or a sugar film, something, or a Michael Moore film that
I reckon it's, I don't know.
got a reputation for being
well, is
fun.
Is it any surprise that there are no sales for some of these films? I mean, it's just like, is it the storytelling, or is it the technique, or is it the subject matter? I mean, it's like, you know, that's what the market is saying.
But my old mentor in the film industry, that's another story though, but he taught me very early on when I started 42 years ago. He said, you are doomed if you operate on precedents. Forget what another film has done. Every new film is a new business transaction, and you have to design the campaign, design the strategy, film by film by film by film. If you put this one out trying to repeat on what you did successfully with something else last year, it's not going to work. You've got to reinvent it, recreate it, redesign it, rethink it. And he was exaggerating, but I think there's a lot of truth in it.
Well, the nuance of that is, I think, but every single conversation in film is about comparatives. So you start with that and you take the learnings from the previous, how they were released, and then you either calibrate what you're doing now with the new information, but to try and go, well, we released it on Easter holidays last year, and it was this film, and it was a comedy, and it had 3 cast members, and a disaster every time. That's why it's a bit like, it's a bit tough for accountants to become great distributors.
But that's why distribution is as creative as, you know, producing, directing, and...
So,
thank you, Mitzi. That's a very unusual statement you just heard here tonight, that distribution is creative. I love quoting Alan Finney, who said once upon a time that distributors can never win. You know, we're parasites. We can never win because if a film succeeds, it's because the film is fucking brilliant. If the film fails, it's because of the distributor. Yeah. So thank you, Mitzi.
Well, thank you.
Made
I'd
my
like
day,
to...
yeah.
Are there any questions? Any more questions? Otherwise, I think we should wrap up and give Andrew and Paul a big round of applause. I have to apologise for my sniffling and coughing. I've been really ill the last few days, but I'm really happy to be here, and I think it's been a really helpful discussion. I just also want to thank the Ozdox team here, the crew, Joshua and Rod and Tom and Martha, front of house, and Frank and Alan up the back, and Erica, and everyone who kind of pulls together to make these events happen on a completely volunteer basis. And next month?
Next month, exactly.
And next month, Tom.
We don't know exactly what's going to happen.
Next month we don't know exactly what's going to happen.
But we know for sure that during the film festival there will be an evening of drinks like there was last year.
But Tom, I've got something here about community and collaborative filmmaking. Possibly. Stay tuned, because we never exactly know what we're going to do next month until we do it.
According to Martha, she doesn't know, but it's all to do with the people who are actually going to be organising that.
That's right.
Surprise topic.
So it's great to see you all here once again, and thank you very much for coming.